I think she
two
is.
people that still want to talk about it, so we're gonna pull it and tell them to talk about it.
Okay, so they're going to Aaron and instruct them to talk about
Yeah,
it.
so they'll do that. And then,
Well, I thought I grabbed the revised one. Well, this is revised, so that's all right.
so we'll do that, and then, so Pam will announce it in the beginning.
Okay, but that's being moved, oh, I mean, that's being
It's being
pulled,
taken off.
okay. Good. That. We've just returned from closed session and we have no reportable action, so I'll be closing that meeting. All right, we are going to call to order the regular city council meeting for February the 6th, 2011. May we have a roll call?
Councilmember DeQuisto,
Present.
Mazzano, Schrader,
Here.
Winter,
Here.
and Mayor Resner.
Present.
And I'd like to make a notation regarding the agenda. Item 411I was originally going to be moved to the regular session, but it has been pulled for tonight and it will not be discussed and there will be no action taken.
Please join me in the pledge, stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation.
No flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us close our eyes and take a deep breath, grounding ourselves, dropping our shoulders, letting everything drift away except our attention to the meeting tonight. As the business of this beautiful city of Reading is done, it is done with the highest interest for the citizens of our community, for the infrastructure of our community, and for moving ahead in a strong and viable way. Each word that is spoken is listened to respectfully. Each person is given the time that they need to state their points of view. By the end of the meeting, each person will feel satisfied that the business has taken place just as it should. So with great gratitude for the opportunity to serve our city, to be in roles of leadership where we listen to the citizens and where we work to meet the needs of all in a respectful and viable way, we say thank you, Holy Spirit, and so it is. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll move to item 3, public comment for any non-agendized matters within the city's jurisdiction. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the City Council cannot take action on public comment items. Please see other options to submit public comment. Mr. Gilbert, are you? Hi, thank you.
I'm Bill Gilbert. I don't have enough respect for this council or the city of Reading to give you a polite salutation. I see the mayor got voted out of office recently. I guess I'm not the only
Is the
one
mic
that
on?
thinks
His mic's not
city
on.
council's a bunch of crooks. And certain employees of this city are lying, thieving cowards. Personally, I'd fight with you as long as possible, but as your criminal enterprise is holding my wife, the former tenant of the trust and my children's trust hostage, I'm forced to throw in the towel for their benefit. The $800 comes out of my children's trust that I'm going to pay you, and they won't miss it. Giving up my civil right lawsuit against the city is a big concession on my part. I was really looking forward to that. I know it's a lot of work because I've done it before, and the Pacific Legal Foundation was going to help me. But that's part of the agreement. Regardless of all else, I've retained my First Amendment rights, and as you can see, I just love to use them. And of course, I'll continue to. This fraud, of course, will cloud all future dealings with the city of Reading and its employees. That being said, part of the agreement is your building inspector has to come out to my dad's house, and he will get a free pass as long as it's not that drunken lying Darren Hale. I'll light up his ears. I'm being polite to you, but I won't be polite to him. Well, sort of polite. But I'll focus on his behavior another day. Let me remind you how this event started. You had an employee named Brandon Griffin who hid his truck a couple blocks from my dad's house and walked up on it, didn't wear a city ID, didn't identify him as a city employee. That's certainly an indication of fraud, and yes, that's what this is, fraud. There's really no good explanation for Brandon Griffin's behavior. So maybe you can try and defend him. I don't care. I was raised by a West Point graduate, and he didn't tolerate stealing, lying, and cheating, and I never did much either. And I find your city employees' conduct irreprehensible. Hence the lack of respect I show for the city and its employees. By the way, aren't a couple of you up for re-election in 2 years? I can't hardly wait. I was late getting started this last election, but I'm a hard worker. Violetta, my wife, who cheated unmercifully, is a member of the BNNC, the Filipino American
Thank you,
Friendship
Mr. Gilbert.
Society in this town. And,
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert.
well, I'm not done.
I'm so
I still
sorry,
have
but you
half a
have
page.
3 minutes, and I'm sure that I will hear from you again soon.
I'm sure you'll hear from me again soon. Thank you.
Have a great evening. All right. I will move, if there's no further public comment, I will move on to item number 4, the consent calendar. The consent calendar contains items considered routine and/or which have been individually scrutinized by city council members and are anticipated to require no further deliberation. If a member of the public wishes to address an item on the consent calendar, please see the options to submit public comment above. It shall be the prerogative of any council member before the consent calendar is acted upon to 1, comment on an item, 2, respond to any public comment on an item, or 3, request the record reflect an abstention or a nay vote on an item, or 4, remove an item and place it on the regular portion of the agenda for delivery of a staff report and or an extended discussion or deliberation. Is there any comment regarding the consent?
I'll move approval.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. I'll move to item number 6, public hearings, petitions, and protests. Court challenge to take action by the city council on any project or decision may be limited to only those issues raised during the public hearing or in witness correspondence delivered in the city council during or prior to the public hearing. Pam, we need to open the public comment, correct? Or should I hear? All right, we hear presentation first.
Director Niemer will give the presentation.
Thank you. So thank you very much. The item before you is a project that we've had on our radar for some time. So in 2005, we first approved an agreement with Jeb Allen and Sierra Pacific on their Shastina Ranch project. And over that time, of course, we had a recession, and then they have since adopted 2 more maps, subdivision maps in that general vicinity. And so the item that we have before you is a public hearing and ordinance because the park credit agreement was attached as an exhibit to the development agreement, which requires an ordinance. So this is a lot of process for that purpose, but the request is pretty simple and straightforward. The agreement, the most recent agreement, and we've had a few iterations, as happens with projects that are around for a while, required that the park be constructed in 2 phases. The first phase would be completed by the 185th lot, and the second phase by the 305th lot. And so what happened was we also took at the last time a change in the whole agreement that instead of the developer constructing the park, that the developer is going to give the city the money and the city's going to develop the park. And so the plans that we had prepared were not adequate for that purpose. And so we were a bit delayed on getting that work done. And then also we have learned with putting out the Salt Creek Heights Park that mobilizing twice for 2 phases isn't terribly, well, it's not cost effective for sure. And so for that reason, we think it's a better use of these park development funds to just do the whole project in 1 phase, and it would be at the second phase, which would have been done at the 305th lot under the old agreement. However, the mapping that they're doing now makes sense for them at the 315th lot. And why so now this actually phases ahead of where we have other park developments requiring park construction, because when we started out with Shastina Ranch, that was the only subdivision that was paying towards the park, and now we have Stones Fair and Stones Creek for a total of 718 units. So if you think about it that way, they are constructing the entire park before half of the subdivisions are built out, which is ahead of what we normally would require. So this request is before you to approve this amended and restated park development and park facilities credit agreement, and to offer the ordinance for first reading.
Are there any questions for Director Niemer prior to opening up the hearing? Seeing none, may I open the hearing? Okay, I'll open up the hearing. I do not have any public comment. I'll close the hearing. Are there any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
I would just merely like to say I'm very excited for the design of this park. Working with these developers, I feel like they've done a really good job of what they've agreed to and put together in regards to working with Parks Department. So I look forward to this. But not to get ahead of myself, but I'll look for a motion.
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
I have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Mayor Resner, may I read the title?
Yes, please do.
Thank you. Honorable Mayor and council members, you've offered for first reading a ordinance entitled An Uncodified Ordinance of the City of Reading Approving the Amended and Restated Park Development and Park Facilities Impact Fee Credit Agreement between the City of Reading and S&J Development and Sierra Pacific Land and Timber Company for the construction of Shastina Ranch Neighborhood Park. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to item 9, the regular calendar. Item 9.1A is consider authorizing the creation of an additional neighborhood policing unit in the city of Reading. Is this going to be City Manager Tippin?
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. I'll be relatively brief on this item. I think this is an item that benefits far more from council deliberation than city manager oration. However, I will bring out a few items for your consideration. One is that there is no question that the city would benefit from another neighborhood police unit. Our current NPU has done a phenomenal job over the last several years, as has been indicated by just the sheer statistics, but that only touches part of what they do out in our community every day, being a proactive unit. And so I think there's no question that we benefit from that. Having said that, however, I also have some concerns given the timing of the creation of the unit. As I noted in the staff report, we're in the beginning stages of creating our next budget, which, as the council knows, is a biennial budget. Will be before you in early part of June for your consideration. At that point, we'll have all of the requests narrowed down from the departments and be able to duly compare all of the priorities and have the council make your decisions based on the competing needs of the city. And it's for that reason that I've recommended in my analysis that the city council give us direction to work towards including this NPU unit into the next budget. My opinion is that if doing it in that fashion gives you an ability to compare the costing of the NPU and what the alternative needs might be for the council to consider over the next 2-year budget cycle. However, I also certainly understand that there's a significant policy issue under which the council may be wanting to move forward, and in that instance, we've included a resolution for your consideration. So if you chose tonight to move forward with the creation of the NPU, what that simply means is that you'll approve the resolution. That will be built into the current budget and then obviously be part of the next budget that we're creating right now. And it will essentially be dubbed as a higher priority than the other items that might come before you. And so with that, I will close my comments and certainly be available for any questions you may have. Police Chief Bill Schuler is here as well and can answer any detailed questions relative to a new NPU. And with that, I'll close my comments and offer it to the council for deliberation.
Councilmember Mazzano, do you have a question?
I would like to comment.
Go ahead.
I wanted to go on record that I'm in complete support of an additional NPU unit. However, given the fact that we're still involved in a pandemic and things are changing rapidly, I don't know where we're going to be at financially in June. I think it would be premature to trade away something that might be more important coming down the road. I've worked in NPUs, both within the Highway Patrol and in the city of San Bernardino. They are without a doubt very effective, giving the chief the latitude to move it around. I think the perception out there right now, according to the constituents that contacted me, is that this NPU is just going to focus on the downtown. And I don't think that's the case. I think Schuler will move these young men around and take action where it's necessary. Barry, do you have the pictures I asked you? Here's what I have a problem with. And we're spending thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars on our homeless situation here. These people deserve a place to live, but unfortunately, what I've found out there is that a lot of them don't want it. And what I'm seeing when I go out in my own clothes and just walk around and talk to people, this is a Cypress Street Bridge. I was there a couple of weeks ago. I don't know how many thousands of dollars we spent cleaning that up. That money that they're talking about, they want us to, the people that don't want this NPU, to use it to help those in need. Well, we just spent 10 grand over there. We could use that money. I don't get that. The other thing I don't get is when I go to Del Taco and I'm waiting in line and I see a guy shooting up behind the 7-Eleven and then he leaves his rig on the street for a kid to pick up or down by the post office. And so for those that don't want the help, we have rooms every night at the Mission. The veterans, they have rooms every night. Some people just don't want it, and I don't deny their right to be out there in the public, but I don't want them committing crimes. And I looked at the statistics that I got from the chief, and I gotta tell you, the homeless situation it's not at the top of the list. They got other problems. And so for me, I would have to say that I support the NPU. I would be in favor of it, perhaps in June, when we know what our resources are. We are coming out of a pandemic, I hope, and we just don't know how much money we're gonna have. And so to commit today to something that we might not be able to afford tomorrow, I think is a bit premature. And I would ask council to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am going to call for public comment so that we can hear from constituents. Can I call Ted Couch first, followed by Terry Moravec? Did I say that correctly? This is my first time saying everybody's name, so, okay.
No matter where you sit on the political spectrum, it's clear that the related issues of homelessness, mental health, and drug addiction are top of everyone's mind here in Reading, and we do need to address them. Like a lot of people in Reading, I've thought about this, and I just cannot come up with how the proposal in front of the council tonight is the right solution. How logically are police supposed to solve the issues of homelessness or drug addiction? Give people a ticket, send them to jail, and then what? If they had money to pay for tickets, they probably wouldn't be homeless in the first place. If they go to jail, they're just going to get released, but now with a record. And how does that make it easier for them to obtain housing? If anything, it seems like utilizing the tools police have, ticketing, arrests, etc., would make it harder for people to obtain housing and end the homelessness. I'm asking each of you to please think through the steps here logically and present to us how more police are supposed to get us to the solution, which is people permanently off the street. For me, it's just not adding up. These problems we're trying to address are not unique to Reading. They're happening all over the country. Many other cities have already taken proactive steps to address these issues, and we need to look to those for lessons learned instead of making a rushed decision. Hiring more police is never a solution to these specific issues and leaves cities with long-term liabilities and potentially untenable financial burden. Neighborhood police units came about to solve the problems of the day in the 1990s. We're not in the 90s right now in Reading or in 2007. We won't find success applying a 90s problem to 2021. We have to look forward and not backward. Policing can't solve the main problems we have here in Reading, not because we don't need policing for certain things. It's just simply the wrong tool for this job. Police are not apartment complexes or therapists or social workers. Forcing the issue onto our police won't solve the problem and is unfair to them and sets them up for failure. We need to set our police up for success and deploy them where they're truly needed and can have an effect. Some have argued we should hire officers to serve as middlemen to connect people living on the streets downtown with services. To me, it doesn't make financial or logical sense to hire police who require significant training, carrying a badge and a gun and a $150,000 a year price tag as middlemen when we can just instead directly connect people with the services they need. The timing of this proposal is also troubling, as we have no idea the long-term effects the pandemic will have on our city and our budget. Housing is also as hard to come by in Reading right now as it has ever been, and criminalizing those without housing is not a logical solution. It's also extremely hard right now to find good police candidates, let alone 4. Real solutions the city should consider include providing housing, street-level response teams of social workers. Examples of these programs in cities like Denver and Eugene have been shown to cost less money than hiring police, to be more effective, and most importantly, to free up police for them to focus where they are truly needed. Voting no on this item now doesn't mean you can't take up these issues again. You should. It just means we don't have enough information right now to make the right decision for our city and the right investment of our taxpayer dollars. I hope you'll again bring up the issue of how to address these issues. To me, it's noteworthy that one of our police officers was recently quoted by the Chamber of Commerce and stated, "I don't feel unsafe downtown at all." We need to move beyond fear and generalization and develop a specific quantified definition of this problem, and we can't hope to find a solution until it's defined. To quote the former chief of police of Dallas, Texas, "We're asking cops to do too much in this country. We are. Every societal failure, we put it off on the cops to solve. Not enough mental health funding, let the cops handle it. Here in Dallas, we got a loose dog problem. Let's have the cops chase loose dogs. Schools fail, let's give it to the cops. That's too much to ask."
Thank you, Mr. Couch. I'm so sorry. You have
Sure.
3 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Terry Morvick. Followed by Rhiannon. Did I say that correctly? Rhiannon Salazar.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, City Administration, fellow citizens. My name is Terry Morbeck. I speak tonight as a previous volunteer at RPD in both residential and business neighborhood watch from 2015 through 2019. I strongly support the addition of a second neighborhood policing unit to service downtown Sacramento River Trail and parks. My volunteer time offered direct contact and support from the existing MPU in the area of neighborhood watch. Our program, and the one still in effect, is an excellent example of how citizens and city departments work together as a team to reduce crime and reduce the fear of crime. I'd like to share a few examples of the effective collaboration NPU had with Neighborhood Watch. Under Sergeant Walt Bullington, the MPU created a brochure that neighborhoods still use today called "Is That House a Drug House?" It allows neighbors to safely observe unusual activity and report it to the MPU. Several successful arrests were made and drug houses were eliminated from neighborhoods. The NPU participated at new Neighborhood Watch startup meetings, and they were always the highlight, showing up for evening meetings whether 3 neighbors attended or 100. Their experience in answering citizens' questions and supporting controllable behaviors that reduce neighborhood crime reaffirmed collaboration between citizens with those who are sworn to protect them. The MPU participated when we created 5 downtown business watch groups sponsored by Viva Downtown that were organized using the same template used for residential neighborhood watch. Viva Downtown and the Chamber of Commerce, with support from the MPU and the 5 business watch groups, coordinated a seminar for business owners focused on crime prevention through environmental design, and another introducing Hill Country's mobile mental health unit. The business watch groups with their leaders remain intact today and would be valuable partners to a downtown-focused MPU. The MPU has provided individual attention to downtown businesses regarding public safety. A good example is Riverfront Playhouse that experienced vandalism and theft during their renovation. The NPU was able to partner with the organization and provide numerous suggestions which enhanced safety and preserved renovation capital. These above-mentioned collaborative neighborhood watch activities were in addition to the many other functions the NPU provided to our city. Of course, their participation was entirely dependent upon availability, as demands were great for their attention. I live, walk, and shop downtown. I am not afraid to be downtown and am troubled that many citizens express this concern. I believe we must all be invested in supporting the revitalization of the core of our city so that everyone feels as safe as I do when visiting downtown. The proactive support of a second neighborhood policing unit will go a long way in making that a reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Salazar?
I live in Anderson, but I consider Reading my city as well. And I do not believe that hiring for...
Excuse me just a second. Could you speak more into, you can pull it down and speak more into it. Thank you, and I'm going to start your time over.
Thank you.
Okay.
I do not believe that hiring 4 new officers is an effective strategy to reduce illegal camping or help the homeless community here in Reading. The money it would take to annually employ these officers should instead be used to expand homeless assistance and housing placement programs. Reading police are not equipped with the skills necessary to handle the problems and struggles our homeless community face. On February 7th, 3 Reading officers shot and killed an unarmed woman named Brooke Leanne Blair. She was part of our homeless community. Criminalizing vulnerable populations, such as the homeless, is not a humane or financially savvy strategy to solve Reading's issues, especially after the toll that our pandemic has taken on our community. I urge you not to hire more officers and instead focus our city's money on helpful programs for our community. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you very much. Larry Olmsted, followed by Mimi Mosley.
Good evening, Mayor Resnick and council members. I'm Larry and Mr. Tippin and staff. I'm Larry Olmsted. I'm the president and CEO of United Way of Northern California. United Way is the coordinating body of the Shasta Equal Justice Coalition, which consists of organizations that include the ACLU, Shasta County Citizens Advocating for Respect, other organizations, and many individuals across the spectrum here in Shasta County. I want to make clear as I start that I'm not here to speak against NPU. The coalition has no position on the NPU yet, but I am here to ask you, before you approve this a six-figure allocation for NPU, to consider other priorities, and especially the idea of a crisis intervention response team. This is an idea that is supported, as you know, by your own police chief, by Sheriff McGreeny, who want to create a pilot program that would send police officers out into calls with mental health professionals to deal with situations involving a mentally ill person or someone going through that kind of episode. And I think, as we all know, those are the kinds of incidents that at times lead to fatal outcomes. And those outcomes are traumatic, difficult for the community, for the victims' families, and for the police officers who are involved. The National Association of Mental Illness reports that 2,700 communities in our nation have some sort of CIT program, and there's a general consensus that these programs definitely reduce the types of incidents we're talking about. Often they can lead and divert mentally ill individuals into the kinds of services they truly need. The position of SEJC, of the Equal Justice Coalition, is that police, the Sheriff's Department, our county government, the city, I know that you all are putting some money into it, effort into it. We believe that this is an approach that is really critical and that will pay positive benefits for the police department and the community. So when we asked basically we believe that as it's currently set up, this pilot project is underfunded. So before you approve NPU, we would ask that you give serious consideration to providing more funding for a pilot project that right now is like, oh yeah, we'll assign one officer, one shift, one officer to this project. It needs more backing than that. So I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Mimi Mosley.
Hello. Thanks for having us tonight, and thank you for your service, especially the new little baby.
Sorry, he's chatty.
I wanted to, I don't want to echo everything that Ms. Morvick said. She said it so beautifully, so mine will be much smaller because you've already heard that. I want to thank you, first of all, for instituting the NPU in the past. They have done an amazing job, and their efforts have headed off problems that we that have got a beautiful track record as a result. Adding an additional team will help better that response even more. As a business owner, I'm concerned with response times, and I'm also concerned that we are already so far down in the number of officers that we need that I just ask you to seriously consider making this a priority, make the MPU additional team happen, and make me feel safe a little bit more as a business owner. So thank you for the time, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. It's the end of public comment. Councilmember Winter.
I just wanted to know if it'd be okay if I asked Chief Schuler to come up. I had a couple questions.
I think that's a great idea. Okay. Chief, could you?
I just had a couple questions for you, Chief, and while you're walking up, I just want to point out that because we received some emails of people stating that there is not enough research to show that we need more officers. We actually spent a substantial amount of money back in 2014 on a public safety study that shows that we are definitely we are down officers. We used to have 119 sworn officers. We have 105, and with vacancies, it's closer to 101 or so. So we are actually down officers. So I wanted to make that point, that study was done. So we know that we do not have enough officers to cover the square mileage of our city. The other issue that I could hear tonight was this, and this tension, and I think we all feel it, we all understand it. I acknowledge that we have homelessness and that we have, we have a lot of mental health needs. And yet I don't see this NPU as being the solution for homelessness. That isn't the purpose of this tonight. This was actually for crime. And so I just wanted to ask you, Chief, if you could address what this downtown and Park and Trail MPU would be doing for crime. Maybe you can refer to the other MPU, how efficient they've been. I mean, it's actually been in solving crime, preventing crime. That would be one issue. And then the other is about the mental health crisis team that we are putting together for response to address some of the needs.
Okay, that's a lot. Sure. I'm not sure where the disconnect got that this was specifically to target homeless downtown. That is, illegal camping is one minor portion of what they would be doing. These officers will be full-time on bicycles or on foot, occasionally in a car or on a motorcycle, but they're going to be down in the community, working closely with the business owners, the folks and the visitors downtown, the customers going to and from, being a presence to prevent crime, as well as responding to those criminal elements that are in there, the drug users, the folks that are stealing from businesses or vandalizing businesses, dealing with those issues. The advantage of a neighborhood police unit versus a beat officer is they're not beholden to the radio. So they're not handling a call quickly, doing what they have to do to solve that issue right then, and then going to the next call. These guys have the time and the direction to look at the big picture and try to solve that issue on the long term. So when it comes to someone that's homeless, they have the time to bring in the resources necessary to try and address that issue on a long term, getting them housing, connecting them with the mission or our partners at Public Health. Same with working with our own code enforcement department or other departments within the city, using those resources to help deal with long-term solutions. You can look at a couple of the motels downtown. The MPU has been successful dealing with those issues. So that's the goal behind MPU, presence, and thinking long-term solutions and not just short-term, hey, we're going to write somebody a ticket and throw them in jail. No, we want to do what we can to solve this problem on the long term. It's community-oriented policing at its finest. On to the crisis intervention. Yes, we are moving forward with that. I am hopeful that we will be bringing that back to council at some point in the very near future. We have a meeting next week to talk about it and finalizing contracts with the county. But the county is going to support the majority of our part of that, and the city will fund some of it. Currently, the sheriff and I are both dealing with recruiting issues and getting folks hired, but we have both committed to get this done. The county has already hired their mental health practitioner that's going to be with our team. And I'm going to be having that person riding with our officers in the coming weeks after they get through orientation so they can get to know the officers and start developing those relationships. But I do think that crisis intervention response team is a huge priority, and I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be a successful program. And if it works, then we can look at expanding it as much as we need to.
Thank you, Chief.
Vice Mayor Schrader?
So to clarify, we have budgeted, and the county, Shasta County, through public, the agency it is, they've committed their funding, and right now we're just waiting for staffing. So we're committed to that project for how long? For the next fiscal year?
Right. We've committed to it in concept, and right now MOUs are going back and forth between him and the county council to finalize that. And once that's done, I'm assuming it'll come back to you. But the city's contributing $50,000 in a car towards the program, and they're contributing $128,000 towards my officer.
Chief, is that for 5 years, that MOU?
Yeah, 5 years.
5 years.
Oh, great. I mean, that's even better. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing on that, and I know you're working with, we should give a shout out to Hill Country, who's also a partner in this. And they already have a mobile mental health crisis van that
Yes.
community members and businesses can call. And this is probably just an expansion of improving on that.
Yeah, and we're using them all the time. They're an excellent resource. And as part of these conversations with the CIRT program, they're able to increase their contract, and they'll be working 7 days a week now as soon as they get the rest of their staff hired.
You know, I think that's a good to point out that Hill Country's program started out kind of small with fewer calls than what would be. Unfortunately, this is like a double edge, that they started out with not as many referrals, which meant that their funding was potentially in jeopardy. But as the referrals increased, which is more communication with law enforcement, the calls have increased, and now they have a greater demand that they're expanding to meet. So I think many community members don't. In fact, well, I don't have a card. I carry around their card with me, because when I go to businesses or just people that I know, and they're not aware of the resource, I hand out the cards, and I've used it before myself when I see people who look like they're in crisis that need assistance. So we do have some services, and your program will be even better.
Councilmember Winter?
I'm just so pleased to see this item come forward for hiring officers. This has been a priority of this council since I've been on the council, and especially now with our downtown opening up, and so many people have poured their hearts, their energy, their resources. We're really excited about downtown, and my overall feeling from citizens is they expect us to move forward with this. And as much as I respect the budgetary constraints and our city manager's desire to work this into next year's budget, as well as Councilmember Mazzano mentioned that as well, I believe that we should move forward with this now. So I'm going to make a motion that we accept option 1, which is to accept the report, and option 3, that we approve our budget to appropriate $200,000 to add 4 MPU officers now, as opposed to waiting till July.
Thank you. Councilmember Mazzano?
Looking at the numbers over the last year, downtown Lake Redding, Caldwell Park, 400 cases of illegal camping. And you know as well as I do, arresting them isn't the answer. We're moving in the right direction with the crisis intervention. That's very positive. And we're also moving in the direction with the temporary shelters that Barry's working on for us. And I certainly believe that just the presence of our officers on a foot patrol, bike patrol, is going to be substantial in that area. I have a stack of emails here, phone calls that I've talked to constituents on both sides of this fence. And it's purely a financial thing for me. I welcome this program. It's a successful program, and I will support it when Barry tells me the money's there. Thank you.
All right, so we have
I would like to point out it's going to take even if we approve this tonight and to approve those 4 officers, it will probably, to at least, even if we move them over from current positions, it'll probably take July before we actually can fill the budget. So I would assume that we might have enough money in vacancies in our current budget to afford this, would you say, Mr. Tippin?
Yeah, this current fiscal year, we should have adequate reserves in the police department. However, I don't know that for sure because we also have had retirements and cash outs, some additional overtime, so we don't have that completely figured out. But historically, when we have these sorts of vacancies, we would have enough to cover it. But just in case we don't, is why the resolution is authorizing an additional $200,000, just so we make sure we have the budgeted amount.
Councilmember DeQuisto.
This will never solve all the problems, and we've seen that from the speakers who've come forward, talking about homelessness and mental illness and more police, and nobody's talked about more jail space or more consequences or Chief Johnson's proposal for a halfway house, so to speak. And it's like an elephant in the room. You can't chew the whole thing at one time, but you can only do what you can only do. In the best of all worlds, I wish that the city would cooperate more with the county and work on getting jail space, because I think that's the #1 deterrent, and it puts a consequence in there. But having said that, and that's not going to happen, it seems to me that I ran on this. I think everybody else has run on it. I think it's something the public wants. They want more officers. Speaking to Ms. Winter's point, it's true. Just because you authorize the money doesn't mean you're going to fill the positions tomorrow. But I think it needs to be done yesterday, and I'm totally in favor of doing it right at the moment. I think it's the highest priority of this council. It's certainly my highest priority, and it should be the highest priority, hopefully, of this council to approve it. So I would second the motion to adopt recommendation #1 to accept the report, and adopt recommendation #3 to adopt the budget resolution to appropriate the extra money to add it ASAP.
All right, we have a first and a second. Is there any other further discussion, any other comments that would like to be made? I would simply, you could sit down if you would like to, Chief. Thank you so much. I would like to echo what has been said by my peers, especially you can't eat it all at once. It does seem like we have been trying to do a couple of things. We've declared a housing crisis and are waiting for those policies in regards to shelters, in a partnership with the county in regards to mental health crisis team, waiting on those MOUs. In the, I believe, 2 items, in the next 2 items, we're going to discuss hiring some more folks to the housing division, because we have grants that are coming in and are going to need help in that. And so I'm just saying I'm proud of this council, because I think that we are attempting to do a little bit in all of the areas in which that we can do. So those are just my comments. If there are, sorry, Vice Mayor Schrader.
Thanks. I just wanted to hear what everybody had to say. I appreciate the comments that they have been presented to us both in person and by email. We received them. It is easier and better if you can email them like at least a couple hours or 3 hours before the council meeting, because it's hard to get everything digested. But as long as we understand that, I think our law enforcement, in collaboration with the county and our Hill Country, for example, are looking for a balance in addressing the needs for our community, that we do know we have to address people who are in crisis, mental health crisis, and we are finding tools for that and training for that. And so I am supportive. I'm cautious about the budgetary impacts that could have. I do know we have had some unfilled positions, so I'm a little bit cautious about that. But it is a need for our community to have a focused crime prevention going forward, in addition to the balance that we are offering with mental health crisis intervention as well. So I'll be supporting the motion.
All right, so I will take a vote if there's no other discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. 4-1.
Honorable Mayor, just to establish some expectations, as the chief said, we certainly don't have the positions now, and we're down, 5+ other positions. However, the chief and I have discussed, and, we will do what we can, using some overtime and try to get some presence out there, since the council has definitely made this a priority. But I want to make sure the expectations are that we won't have this MPU anytime soon, but we will do efforts as we can.
Yes, thank you. I think that Councilmember Winter made a good point, and that it may take us 6 months to roll out these positions and have them in action. Thank you very much for that clarification. Yeah, unfortunately, no. All right, we're moving on to item 9.1B, consider City of Reading membership to the Sister City Program. City Manager Tippin, is this you as well?
Yes, thank you. So this item was brought up by Councilmember Mazzano on December 15th meeting, that the staff would look into Sister Cities program. My conversations with Councilmember Mazzano after the fact were that his intent largely was in increasing the amount of tourism. And so actually most of the credit belongs to my assistant Camille Woodstrom, who actually did all of the research here. And I greatly appreciate all of that work. And so we contacted the Sister Cities organization. We contacted several cities that have a Sister City program, including one that is just now starting up a Sister City program, basically with 2 questions. One was, has this or will this increase your tourism? And the second, is it frankly worth doing? And what we got back was no and no. And what we think that's based on is largely that it doesn't include increased tourism. It was never was expected to increase tourism. The Sister Cities program was really about a cultural and arts exchange between communities on other sides of the planet. I think some of the stuff that we were hearing from other cities is that, with the new technologies and social media and the expanse of the worldwide network, that the need for Sister Cities organization has diminished quite a bit. I think we would recognize that in our own community in terms of the amount of people that we have visiting here from other parts of the globe has drastically increased over the last few decades. If you go back into the 70s and 80s, where that cultural exchange was probably far more important, Sister Cities was a more robust program that we would have. And then lastly, I would add, in all the other cities where they had a successful Sister City program, it was always run by a separate organization, whether it be a Rotary Club or a specific nonprofit that was put together to run the Sister Cities program for a cultural and arts exchange. The cities always did support it in some fashion, even if it was just the $800 a year for the membership in Sister Cities program. So based on my conversations with Councilmember Mazzano and his intent, my recommendation is that we forego this opportunity to join the Sister Cities organization. And with that, I'll be available for questions.
Are there any? Councilmember Mazzano.
Yes, I concur with your assessment after our discussions, Barry. Do me a favor, pass on to Camille. Outstanding job. Real education for me, and took a little bit of her time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. So then is my question that I'm going to assume that I do not have a motion to.
Yeah, if you just want to accept the report and call it good, then that's all we would do.
All right, well then we accept the report. Thank you very much. We will move to item 9.2A, consider adoption of 2 resolutions approving new positions within the City of Reading Housing Division and Public Works Department. Mr. Bade.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. The new positions before you this evening there are 3 positions in the Housing Division and then 1 position in Public Works. The positions for the Housing Division are related to federal and state grants and local affordable housing funds used to develop and implement plans, programs, and projects to benefit low and moderate income individuals and families. Some of the key funding sources include, at the federal level, we have our Reading Housing Authority Housing Choice Voucher Program. We have our Home Investment Partnership Program, known as the HOME Program. We have the Community Development Block Grant Program. And then at the state level, we have the CalHome and Permanent Local Housing Allocation Programs. And then locally, the city administers the Affordable Housing Loan Fund, Reading Electric Utilities, Residential Energy Discount Program, and the Successor Housing Agency Low and Moderate Income Housing Asset Fund. Collectively, I would consider these funding sources direct, recurring funding sources. Beyond these funds, over the last 5 years, the Housing Division has facilitated partnerships with developers and been awarded state affordable housing and sustainable communities, which is AHSC, and then also the Infill Infrastructure Grant Program, also known as the IIG. We've partnered, and we're approaching the $50 million mark in those funding sources. In addition, the Housing Division is currently in the process of receiving Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Program funds, which will be administered by the state. And those funds are to assist the Housing Division with housing, infrastructure, economic revitalization, and planning programs. One portion of these funds is a CDBG DR MHP funding, which a resolution was presented to you this evening for more than $16 million that it will be used directly to create housing opportunities in the community. More information for the other programs in the areas of infrastructure, economic revitalization, and planning will be brought back to City Council for consideration once we understand the state's full process with that. The Housing Division consists of 11 full-time employees who administer and manage these funds and the affordable housing programs that go along with them. In October 2020, following the departure of the Development Services Director, the City Manager initiated an internal staff reorganization and appointed me to serve as the Deputy City Manager to oversee the Housing Division and to serve as the Director of Economic Development and Innovations. Along with the internal staff reorganization, the Housing Division's management analyst position was assigned to Development Services, and this position transfer has left the Housing Division with a void, specifically, I would say, in the areas of CDBG program administration, policy, writing and implementation, and then also in our our data collection and some of our federal and state compliance levels. Considering the implementation of this reorganization, the funding sources awarded, the proactive approach by staff to seek and be awarded new funding sources, and the resulting programs and projects developed, staff's workload has increased and additional staffing is necessary to meet the regulatory requirements for each funding source. The 3 new positions, there are 2 housing specialists and 1 housing tech, being requested will be funded by personnel savings, future revenues from increased staff production, and additional administration fee revenues. Overall, these new positions will allow the Housing Division to efficiently and effectively operate, seek funds or other additional grant funding sources, maximize the resources, and be responsive to our federal and state grant partners. In regard to the Public Works Transportation Planner position, the transportation industry is rapidly evolving, emphasizing the need to provide safe and efficient facilities for all modes of transportation to meet state goals and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This has significantly increased the need to comprehensively assess and plan the future transportation network. Several major planning efforts are about to start. Some of those include the general plan and the associated transportation element, the next round of active transportation, highway safety improvement, and local partnership programs, the Park Marina Corridor Plan, the Regional Transportation Plan, the State Route 273 Plan, there's the Climate Resiliency Transportation Plan, and there's some short-term and long-term, or short-range and long-range transit plans. Currently, the Public Works Department has 1 transportation planner. The planner, that position spends a bulk of their time managing the day-to-day RABA operations for the region. The remainder of the time is spent on other transportation planning activities as time allows. Over the last 2 years, Public Works has funded that position of about 75% to support those planning activities. A bulk of the funding for this position would come from RABA and from streets. Within the city, development activity has reached historic levels, causing planning's workload to increase, and they need their full-time planning position, which leaves Public Works with really no support. As such, staff would like to recapture the funding from planning and hire a new full-time transportation planner, and public works. The balance of the funding for the full-time position will come through cross charges to capital projects and funding through various grants, both already secured and others planned to be received in the future. Consider this information. It is staff's recommendation to adopt both of the budget resolutions as presented. With this, I will conclude my presentation. I'm available if you have any other questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Winter?
Thank you. Mr. Bate, I just had questions about the housing department staff. So we're looking at hiring staff because we are going to be able to get access to some grants that are coming down. Some big grants for housing. Is that what I'm assuming? That if we have staff, we could actually get these grants?
Yes, and so what we'll do is we need to shift basically the workload to these new staff members and let some of the upper level staff handle the direct efforts with our state and federal partners. So there's a lot of documentation that goes with each project that we are going to be awarded. And so when you have that, it's just very time consuming, and you have to make sure that you are spending the money in a timely fashion. For instance, if you look at the CDBG DRMHP funds, that's $16 million in funding. It'll probably turn into 10 to 12 projects, and each one of those projects has to be managed. Those projects will also require other funding sources to be layered with that. So it becomes very time intensive. And then also with other funding sources that we have currently, we have been awarded some state funding that we have to develop programs. We need to market those programs, and we need to implement those programs and get those funds out to the community, which creates more projects. And so you really have to have a staff that's able to follow through and be timely and efficient. And so right now we just don't have enough staff members to do so.
Do you see opportunities for us with some of these grants and ahead to be able to work with the county and really strategically target and collaborate, particularly to target some of the chronic homeless? I know that's being done in other communities. Do you see that opportunity coming with this funding?
Yes, we do. And we've started some of that, inner workings with the county, specifically on the service side of things. They're a great service side of our equation, where we are that more bricks and mortar. We bring in the funding to create the facility and help develop the partnership between whether it's a property owner or a provider, and then partnering with the county to bring those services in. So yes, and there are some specific state funding sources out there that we're getting awarded currently, and then we also have other applications in, and we're also watching other NOFAs to apply for those. So having additional staff to help out with some of that, doing the grant applications, and then creating those programs would be very helpful. And it really we're trying to solve those issues in the city, whether it's low-income families or it's homeless services. So we cover a variety of people. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Well, then I will entertain a motion all right, Councilmember Mazzano.
I'll be happy to second.
And a second by Councilmember Winter. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Bade. All right, we're moving on to item 9.5B.
We're going to have a double presentation here. The first will be by Financial Manager Joe Bowers, and then the portfolio management presentation portion will be handled by Assistant Director Nick Zettel.
All right, thank you very much.
Good evening, Mayor Resner, council, staff. Pleased to be in front of you tonight. I will speak briefly, as Mr. Tippin just alluded to, that we kind of have a feature presentation after myself. Mr. Zettel is going to speak about our portfolio management. As you all know, that our budget every year is about $140 million, and if you stack in debt service and capital outlay, et cetera, associated with our resource portfolio and the variable costs, et cetera, it easily climbs to at least half of our budget, and it's something that we have to manage. And so that will be presented by Mr. Zettel after myself. So just, I'll be brief. This is our mid-year highlights, mid-year through the second year of our biennial budget. Revenue is 13% higher than budget, and that excludes cap and trade revenue, which we do not budget for. It's a special revenue fund. Load was 3.5% higher than planned due to a hot summer and reduced mobility. And when we come back in May, or when we present our budget, I'm going to show you some neat slides that shows Google Analytics and what COVID has done to mobility and energy demand. Power costs 9% higher than budget, and it's due to increased wholesale sales and native load. And I just briefly skipped this last bullet here. That December was the first month since the onset of the pandemic, and I would say onset, I mean like May and June when it really happened in Reading, we started shutting down, that commercial load was actually lower than forecast. I think that's because there was that spike in December and everyone kind of hit the brakes and everyone was really safe in December, but that was lower than forecast. Every other month it's been higher as well. Continued weakness in the natural gas market. If you follow the daily prices, it's higher today because what's going on in Texas and things like that. But just when I say weakness, I mean it's lower than what we had budgeted for. And then system O&M expenditures, 14% lower than budget. And vacancy savings are captured. If you don't pay payroll, you capture that. But a lot of these savings are simply just delayed. We have contracts that are going to happen or items are encumbered, but because this is presented on a cash basis, it appears like we're saving maybe more money than we're going to by the end of the year. This chart just shows retail sales. You can see the sliver, which is the 2021 actual. All year, it was over the 2021 budget. As I just mentioned, revenue's higher. It dipped a little bit lower in November, December timeframe. We're expecting it to pretty much be on budget for the balance of the fiscal year. Operating expenditures continue to be close to the same as far as the budget and prior year actual. You can see that we have saved about $5.3 million through this year. We budget for all possible expenses. We get appropriations. That's how we have the authority to spend money, but we're not necessarily going to spend all of those. It's a brief industry update. So on the federal level, as we know, a new regime is in office. So the Keystone XL pipeline was halted. We rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement, and we suspended new fossil fuel leases on federal lands. What does that mean to a utility that's operating in California? Not much. We're already playing this game. State regulations, new rules and procedures for renewable portfolio standards came out in December as far as what you can contract for and how long those contracts are. State legislation, NCPA is working closely with members to understand funding allocations and the impacts for the members, and this is for the COVID resilience, for the COVID relief. And then there's new bills coming forward for electric resiliency, wildfire mitigation, procurement, and energy storage. So like I said, I was going to be brief and try and be quick, so Mr. Zettel has some time. Just to end on it is days of cash on hand or our reserves is within Council Policy 1414. Our mid-year request later tonight that will be presented by Finance Officer Greg Robinette includes a few things that you're already aware of, which were some costs to clean up for the TOTOP that Director Beans has spoken with you all a few times about. Increased development in downtown that was not necessarily, and around town that was not necessarily anticipated when we developed this budget a couple of years ago. Costs associated with the line of credit that council approved last fall that we said we were going to clean up with the mid-year, and then also increased COVID assistance. So it's the last leg of our 2-year budget, and we expect to finish strong by June 30th of this year. The utility is in great, I would say, financial health considering the pandemic that we are in and hopefully at the tail end of. But we continue to make significant financial commitments that were not included in the budget 2 years ago, which is TOTOP and wildfire, although we anticipated them and we put in some placeholders in our financial plan. Not all of them were anticipated. And then the COVID impacts to our utility continue to be manageable, and our focus continues to be on our customers. And with that, I will entertain any questions for the finance portion of this. If not,
We have none. I'm going to
Okay.
get off easy.
thank you.
You can't run off yet, Jim. Quickly, within 6 feet of distance, you have to show me to make sure I'm clicking this right.
Left click.
There it is, okay. Not inspiring confidence, right? Sorry about that. So, good evening, members of the City Council, staff, public. My name is Nick Zettel. I'm the Assistant Director of the Resources Group with Reading Electric. Quick disclaimer on this, there's 15 slides in the deck. I'm not going to read this line by line tonight. What I want to do is touch on each slide briefly and provide kind of an initial look at this program. And as Joe mentioned, help make a connection to the financial report with our power costs and revenues and kind of give a behind the scenes look at it. These are the topics we're going to cover tonight. In the interest of time, I think we should just go ahead and get started. Before we move into the meat of the subject matter, I want to stop and recognize prior actions by city councils that served as a building blocks for this program that we're running today. Step by step, we've built this system with city council's awareness and support, and that is absolutely crucial for our success. It started way back from 1990, a series of resolutions for commodity trading authorities from power and gas, pipelines, transmission, and various things. And a bulk of it really happened in the last few years with city council as we've readied ourselves to move into new markets. The big problem currently in California is they're running out of power in the summer. Some of you may know that there was blackouts back in August. Approximately 500,000 customers were shut off. No REU customers were shut off, fortunately for us. And due to forward planning and a highly trained group of energy traders that we have, we were actually able to sell surplus energy from the Reading Power Plant into this market and help avoid blackouts for many, many more customers. I don't want to speculate too far, but the amount of power we were selling probably helped avoid shutoffs of 10 to 15,000 more customers in California somewhere. Along with the big issue of them running out of power, the big future they have is a major push for zero carbon emissions by 2045. Good news for Reading Electric and the city of Reading is we're well on our way towards this goal. As we march closer to 2045, it's going to become more and more difficult to squeeze out efficiency and find these zero carbon resources. And this is where portfolio management really starts to take center stage. In order to meet all these different areas, we need to be ensuring that we are very efficient and effective in what we're doing with the assets of the city. So stepping into portfolio management, what I really want to do is kind of assign the risk issues by time period that we look at. This is important. It allows our staff to focus on their particular subject matter expertise areas. Some of our staff focus on very short term, whether it's real time, like right now, there's a power trader working at the desk in our control center. They'll be working the night shift, all the way to looking out 20 to 30 years with our long-term group that works over at the AvTech building. It really helps define our time management priorities for risk mitigation and where we need to spend most of our time. When we organize our risks in a time sequence, we can deploy our analytics in the same manner. And so different tools and processes are needed as we move forward in the future planning space. And I think a good example of this is the tools and the analytics you want to use for deciding if we're going to buy power from the market tomorrow or dispatch a generator are very different in the tools and analytics from deciding which future 20-year power procurement we are looking at for renewable resources. Moving it in the time space horizon really allows us to use the right tools. Diving into the 0 to 2 year time frame, the key takeaways of this slide are that number one, all the actions we have are governed by our energy risk policy. Number two, we contract with a consultant named Ascend Analytics for a software program called PowerSim. I don't want to get into the details, but it's a very complex system that uses a lot of algorithm-based stochastics to run simulations, right? What-if scenarios. And number three, the leadership team has provided weekly model data as the model runs every week, and then we test it against our energy risk policy to see if everything's in line. We're not going to go over all this information. The point of this is to look at the sheer volume of inputs and data that's used for simulations. And as most of us know, the more inputs we have going into it, the more variables we put, the more risk we can simulate coming out of this. This is an actual live example of our power position report. This is a few weeks old, but these are some of the things that we look at, and then we monitor this to make sure that nothing's out of tolerance. And if it is, it gets flagged for discussion and action immediately. This is a gas position report. It's similar. This gives an indication of where we're at with our gas supply, whether it's in our storage facility or coming to us on contract on the pipeline. The benefit of having a modeling program is it allows us to identify our threats and opportunities, and really it allows us to separate on cost versus revenue and risk. So what we can do is some what ifs on some of these, and we're doing a lot of what ifs right now. This is important. I think it shows the visual, it's the life cycle of our management process. And what it really shows is this never ends. The commodity markets are live every day. Gas prices are changing every day. Power prices change every day. Like Joe mentioned, it's freezing cold in Texas and the rest of the country, and gas prices doubled overnight over the weekend. And so immediately the first thing we did this morning is looked at our modeling and looked at our risk and made sure that, guess what, everything's okay because our prices are hedged and we don't have any exposure. Actually, we looked at it to see if we should be selling into the market. Future expectations. So the future expectations I have is to integrate this process into everything that comes before the City Council, whether it's short-term or long-term, renewable contracts, gas contracts, anything that needs to come forward. And I'm hoping this spring to bring a long-term renewable contract to the council for consideration that's going to be fully vetted with this process. The recommendation tonight is to accept staff's recommendation of our quarterly financial report, industry activities update in this presentation. And you've been provided with printed copies of this presentation. If you have any questions anytime, please reach out.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Schrader, you have a comment or question?
I want to thank both Mr. Bowers and you, Mr. Zettel, for coming in tonight to give us a brief update. It is very complicated in a lot of ways, but the one thing that we all, and I am always trying to remind everybody, that we are reliable. We don't shut off power when everyone around us is, and we're more affordable. And we're also celebrating 100 years this year. This is our 100th year that we're celebrating. So we're looking at ramping up some ideas, I think, to bring about that celebration, which really gets to, you gave us some background on, which is like just snapshots of the background, but think of, councils before us that made the decision to become our own public utility. And we want to always remind ourselves to be thankful for that, because if you look at, how you have been using leveraging where we're at to actually provide power to other people during the blackouts that they wouldn't have otherwise, and how that fits into our economics, our stability, and the way we can then keep our rates low in Reading and the power on. So I want to thank you both for making the report tonight.
Thank you.
And I'll make a motion that we approve the reports.
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We accept the report.
Thank you.
Honorable Mayor, if I thought it was a really important presentation for REU to make, because I appreciate Vice Mayor Schrader's comments, and I can tell you from firsthand knowledge how complex every one of those decisions is. And I think, we really need to appreciate the quality and technical expertise of our staff that is at REU, not only going back 100 years in the decisions being made, but in each decade hence. The decision to join the CVP, the Central Valley Project, when nobody else was. We did in the late 60s. The decision to divest from connection to PG&E and connect to WAPA. All these decisions over the time made by REU staff and approved by City Council have brought us to where we're at. And I think it's just a testament to the council running a fine shop and making sure we have expertise making those recommendations.
Thank you for those comments. We'll move on to item 9.6B. Director Niemer.
Yes, thank you very much. So tonight we have before you a request to appoint 2 members to a committee to work with me on the next lease agreement with Advanced Reading for the operation of the Civic Auditorium. So we entered into this agreement in 2011 in kind of the depths of the recession, where really it was a last resort of closing the Civic or finding an operator. And from the beginning, it has been a very unique arrangement for a very important asset. And as the current lease is coming up, it will be expiring on September 30th of this year. There is a lot going on relative to the operation of the Civic. So we have, of course, they've been closed since March of last year. We also have their biggest tenant, the Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry, constructing their own campus off a site that they will eventually transfer their use to. And so because of this arrangement with Advanced Reading and their major subcontractor, Bethel, there's not really a good industry model to go to or other standard procedures for this type of arrangement. And so we think it is prudent to have a working group to kind of do a deeper dive into the operations, the expenses, capital needs, and to work to develop a long-term arrangement to continue this partnership. And so at the Community Services Advisory Commission meeting last week, they did appoint 2 commissioners, Josh Devine and Tony Lewis, to serve on that. And tonight we're asking the City Council to also appoint 2 members to this effort.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Director Niemeyer from the council prior to us making a decision or suggestion?
No questions.
Councilmember Winter.
Okay. I would like to thank you for that presentation, and I agree a working group would be very wise. So I would make a motion that we assign Mayor Resner and Vice Mayor Schrader, who sits on CSAC, to develop parameters for a long-term lease agreement with AR for the Civic.
Anybody have any thoughts or opinions of that? I'm willing and able. Vice Mayor Schrader, do you feel fine with that?
I appreciate that. I would like to be involved in that. I'm currently the liaison to the community service, as you have been for several years, and we're on it. So I'll be happy to help out.
All right, so I have a motion. Does anybody want to, oh, sorry, are you seconding that motion?
I'll second.
maybe?
Yeah,
Okay.
good idea.
First and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right,
Thank you
passes
very much.
unanimously.
Honorable Mayor, I'd be remiss by not recognizing Kim and her staff for their expertise in managing every facility we have and
Thank
corralling
you.
12,000 kids all summer long. So I want to
Yes.
recognize that as a different type and more unique set of expertise and skills.
A woman of many hats. Thank you.
And the
very
same
much.
goes for Greg and Alan and her staff next and finance stuff.
Yes, we'll move to 910A. Consider the City of Reading mid-year budget review for fiscal year 2021. All right, Greg, let us have it.
Barry's going to get me my slide deck up, and then we'll
All right,
get going.
perfect.
So, Mayor, Council, glad to be here tonight and looking forward to presenting the update. I would say it's all good news, and I'm looking forward to giving it to you. So, first chart here, it's 3 bars. The first bar over there on the left is kind of one of the recommendations that we have attached in the staff report, and that is to increase our beginning cash balance to $16,500,000. That's as a result of completion of our annual audit. There was more cash, which was essentially a result of increased revenues over projections and expenditures that came in under staff projections. And so we're recommending adjusting our beginning cash number to $16,500,000. As you can see right here, at the end of December, we were just over $5 million. That's largely a result of timing of various revenues. You'll see a little bit later, we collect the largest portion of our property tax. I think it was about $10.5 million in January. So in January, cash basically overnight went up 11 or $12 million. So we still project to end the year right around $15 million, and that would be a 17.7% cash reserve, well in excess of the 10% required reserve. So these graphs, first on the left there is our revenues. As you can see, the lighter bar is our budget and the darker bar is our actual. So when it comes to revenues, you want the darker bar to be higher. That means we are exceeding our expectations. And when it comes to expenses, you want the darker bar to be under the lighter bar. And again, both of those are in the positive position for us at this time. I'll dig into some of the details of those as we move through the presentation, but we're happy to report that each of those is in a good spot as we kind of reach December. This graph kind of shows you the trajectory of revenues from July to December. It's kind of hard to look at, but I think it's actually a good point how close we are. The light pinkish color line here is actually last fiscal year, the actual revenue received. The yellow dashed line was our budget for this fiscal year. This is actually in compounding month over month. So July and August add together, and that's the number you're seeing in August. And this dark line is what's actually happened in this fiscal year. So year over year, we're down a little bit. Overall, I think all of us would be very happy to report it's only 5%. I think when the pandemic first started, we had fears that it could be much worse. But we're actually over our projections by 4%. So we're happy to report that at this time of the year. This is digging into some of the details. Our sales tax has overperformed our projection by about $2 million. Property tax through December, again, not a lot of projected revenue through December. Our biggest projection comes in January, and that actually exceeded our expectations as well. We collected about, I want to say it was a total of around $12 million. 10.5 is the main property tax, and there's some other components to it. Then you have TOT was slightly under. Again, when the pandemic first started, I think we were concerned that we would see a significant revenue loss there. That has not materialized as of yet, but we're continuing to monitor that revenue. Other taxes, that includes cannabis, and again, leading into one of the recommendations of staff, we're recommending increasing our cannabis tax revenue from $700,000 up to $1.6 million. I'll go back to when we adopted the budget, I think we had $250,000 in this year in 2021. We since then increased it to $700,000. Again, not a lot of information we're basing those projections on, and it's clear now at this point in the year we're going to well exceed $700,000. We might even exceed the $1.6 million, but we were comfortable with the $1.6 million adjustment. So it's about a $900,000 revenue adjustment that's actually being recommended tonight. As you can see, building fees is above kind of projections by about $600,000 there. That just goes to show how busy they are down in development services, I think. They have a lot of work to do. And the health of the local economy, I think, is reflected in that number. This number might cause some concern. Why are we off $2 million in revenue from other governments? That's largely a result of timing of projects, timing of when the revenue comes in for various grants. And you'll see in a slide or two, Public Works is where a lot of those grant projects lie. And they also have huge budget savings as a result of this same number. So nothing to be concerned about there. Those numbers will come in as we complete those projects. And then there's other revenue over projections of about $1 million. So overall, we're about $1.5 million above our budget projections, and that is a good news item. Just a quick reminder, this is our total tax revenue, just kind of shows you a quick breakdown of the different types of tax revenue. And I thought it was interesting because, through December, we were about $21.4 million. And like I say, I think through January, we actually jumped up to about $33 million, and the blend entirely changed. So that kind of just goes to that point of the property tax coming in January. It kind of creates a V shape to our cash. Our cash kind of deteriorates into December, and then overnight, basically, we increase our cash back up, and our revenue mix entirely changes. But these are our primary tax revenues that are created here in the city of Reading. And it was $21.4 million through December. This is a quick look at our budget to actuals. Police, this is a savings. Overall, we're about 6.8% below projections, or about $3.5 million in savings. As you can tell, most of that as a result of Public Works, and that has to do with the grant projects that I referenced. Fire, this says $3 million. It's rounded up. It was about $2.5 million that they were over projections. There's a couple things going on there. One, another really bad fire year in the state of California. For overtime, we billed about $1.6 million already this year. So that's $1.6 million of that over budget. I have to admit a little error that was done by me in timing. December was quite a busy month in finance. We actually had somebody pass away, and it slipped my to-do list, and there's a $700,000 adjustment to an expense that I did not make. So when you make those adjustments, they're only down to being over budget about $200,000. And a lot of that has to do with the timing of their overtime. As we know, during summer, we have a lot more overtime. And then slowly over time, you see their budget catch up. So I anticipate by March, they might be right in line with budget. They might be slightly over or slightly under, but we'll continue to monitor that But as of right now, no concerns there and very minimal budget requests that you'll see in a couple slides. Real quick, just wanted to kind of go over the makeup of our general fund budget. We oftentimes look at the total budget, and I think it's important to see, where all this money's going. But I also think it's important to realize, like Public Works is largely funded by grants, or they charge out their time to other areas, and they really have no impact on the kind of discretionary budget of the city of Reading. And the police and fire element of our budget grows. So I just think it's important to see the different elements of our budget and how that changes when you start to take into account revenues that are being used to offset those budget expenditures. So real quick, I'll just go down the requests that are being made on the budget amendment. The general fund is requesting $32,000 for police. That's to purchase a vehicle, and there's some additional contract costs associated with removing broken down vehicles across the city that were previously generating revenue and are no longer generating revenue. And then fire is requesting $20,000. That's for the replacement of some thermal imaging cameras and some high visibility jackets. Parks is requesting $8,000 for increased security at some park facilities. And then animal control is requesting $19,000 in line with, I think at the last meeting you guys adopted a resolution increasing that contract amount. So this is bringing back the funding associated with that. Code enforcement is requesting an additional $30,000 for a vehicle associated with the new cannabis code enforcement officer. And there is $500,000, it says general fund, it's the general fund capital project fund, to finish off the Stillwater Business Park and begin to design the rest of the, the finishing touches out there, so to speak. As Joe referenced, the electric department is requesting $3 million from a variety of things. I appreciate that he went over that in detail. Then there's 2 requests from internal service funds. The IT department is requesting $87,000, kind of a combination of some increased funding for finishing the hardware on the doors, and then also a contract that was kind of not budgeted for, and this is cleaning up their budget to account for that contract for the development services software. Building maintenance is requesting $5,000 to do some safety studies on ARC testing. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation, and I will be available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there, I have a question. When you said we're 1.5 million over, you meant over revenue that we've received versus what we had budgeted, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I understand that correctly. Are there any other questions? Councilmember Mazzano.
I don't know if this question goes to you, Barry, or not, but we talked earlier today. I'm looking at this. The Parks Division budgeted $2,500 for the overtime, came in at $33,000. I just want to know why.
Yeah, that's associated with what we refer to as cross-charging. So the parks staff have unique skill sets and unique tools to do various things, and so they often will do work for other departments. For instance, they did more work than anticipated for the fire mitigation for REU. We had some extra money at the soccer park, so instead of hiring a contractor, our guys went in and used that money to build new irrigation and put in some sod on the outside of the park and refresh the entire park, and so that was done on an overtime basis. So all of that overtime is cross-charged out to other jobs, grants, or departments.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions, or we need a motion to accept the report?
I'd be happy to make a motion to accept the report.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. And
Vice Mayor Schrader, just want to make sure that motion included adoption of the resolution. I'm sure it did, but just for confirmation's sake. Okay, thank you.
thank you. That included the, okay, our next item, since I was following along, is item 11, travel reports. None? Okay, and item 12, do we have any suggestions from council members? Oh, Councilmember Winter.
I do. I want to thank the council has appointed me earlier last year it was, as liaison to our Native American leaders. And so Mr. Tippin and I have been meeting periodically, a little bit less so with COVID this past year, with leaders and trying to figure out what are paths to move forward, things of interest that we could partner with them. We've done a few things, and one of the things that's come up is they've been very interested in signage that would recognize that this area being its historical Wintu territory. So I would like to know if there would be interest in the council to ask our city manager to reach out to Caltrans to see if there might be some options on how we might move forward to create signage that as you enter main entry points into our city, maybe on 273, 299. From my understanding, I-5 is a little more difficult because it's federal. But there might be some opportunities to work with Caltrans to get recognition of our Wintu heritage.
I agree.
Okay.
So I'll get working on that. I have talked to Caltrans a little bit just for timing wise. It may take a little bit just to get Caltrans engaged, and then also probably do some outreach for, make sure that we would do everything right before it'll come back. So it may take a couple months to get back to council.
Wonderful, thank you. Are there any other suggestions from council members relative to potential topics? If not, then I will adjourn us.